Hi folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report. I called my buddy Rust and I said, and by the way, when I give you these reports, a lot of them come from me, going to different stores or calling people on the phone or researching online with the DEC to find out this information. So I called Russ and I said, Russ, look, I've got to do some radio reports and I wonder if you've got some ideas of things that have struck you this year that you think other people might be interested in. And of course, I didn't give him any time to think of this. He was supposed to pop up with an answer right away. Well, he kind of did. He said, well, I've spent my whole summer trying to catch bass. I've really devoted this year to bass fishing. And while it's fun and it's engaging for me and I've learned a lot, I've missed the real calling of the waters that really has affected my life. He says, I've been doing this now for 13 years up here. I never saw a muskie, thought of a muskie, or even imagined a muskie being caught before I came up here. And when I started, I didn't know anything. It was people, he said, like me and his friend Dave and his friend Bill Losey and so forth that sort of taught him, took him to the places where the muskies were. But he said, muskie fishing has become... if I said spiritual, if I said a religion or whatever, none of those words would be wrong. It's something that literally calls Rust. And he said, so lately I've been going back out and going for muskies. And it's so different. And I think maybe a lot of you wouldn't be interested, but maybe a lot of you have never experienced the rewards of what this fishing can be like. Russ says, it's something that requires so much more of me than going and catching bass. And it gives me so much more as well. Number one, I have to learn how to, every cast is so critical. The placement of that cast is so incredibly, it makes a difference between success and total failure. And what he's talking about is the way he fishes, you've got to cast that lure within an inch or two of the very shoreline, not 10 inches from the shoreline, an inch or two. And so that requires becoming a master of how to cast that lure. Then what lure you use, Russ does not want to ever kill a muskie. So he will only use a single hook. But again, it requires observation. He says, Russ says, when I started, I didn't know and I couldn't really tell what was happening. He said, now, one of the secrets is watching. Even my peripheral vision, I'll see a wake starting with a fish. And he said, most people wouldn't see that, but that determines everything because once you see that movement of the surface of the water, I'm not talking about something jumping. I'm talking about a slight change in that water along the shore. You know that the muskie has seen it. You know that now the action may occur, but there's so many other variables that take place. Russ said, I can tell just by the beginning of that wake, whether it's going to be something the muskie is just slightly curious, is enraged at, whatever it might be, and it'll make the difference of whether I catch the fish or not. So it becomes a whole different type of sport, and it really is. You kind of fish for that explosion more than most type of fishing because it all either begins with or eventually ends with an absolute explosion when the fish hits. Rust has got to the point where he really doesn't care if he catches a fish because if the fish gets away, then he can go for it again. He doesn't have to worry about being so careful and not hurting it, allowing it to live. That's why he uses single hooks, and he always releases that fish beside the boat. Now, I'm telling you all this because it's another element of fishing that we have here better than any place I've ever seen in the country. And I've spent my life traveling the country, going to real famous places for every species of fish. And I can tell you, the fishing we have in our tributaries is different than almost any place. It allows somebody that's always wanted to catch a muskie but thought they couldn't, that always figured that it was a fish of thousands and thousands of casts and it was like winning the lottery. No. You go to any of our tributaries that have muskies in them And if you follow some of the things that we're trying to talk about, that I would try to teach people, you almost have, you at least have tremendous success of hooking into a muskie every time you go out. So in Russ' case, it's the allure or the lure. I hate to use that word because it becomes such an awful pun, cliche, whatever. But if it offers something different. Muskie fishing, there used to be when I was a kid, they called it muskie fever. Once you had that fish strike and fight you, it became something that you never lose. You'll always be stricken with muskie fever. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report.